All right, everybody, thanks for joining Hero Institute's prep session for your job interviews. So, we are very excited that we have partnered with this time around a few different, well, I'll say a couple. Couple means two, few means three or more. So, we have partnered with a couple of organizations to actually come and do on-site interviews at our location. These on-site interviews are for phlebotomy only, just as an FYI. They are for phlebotomy positions. They are for inpatient phlebotomy positions. And then we have another, and one is a mobile phlebotomy company. So two different types of positions that'll be here. Today, I wanted to kind of prepare you all for what that job interview looks like. For the majority of you who are on today's meeting, I have already reviewed your resumes. Together, we looked at the resumes and revamped them because that's a part of our process here at Hero Institute. We want to make sure that you have gotten, the full everything you need in order to be prepared to start going to these job interviews so that your resume is up to par. It says the keywords that it needs to say to go through the checks because AI is looking at these applications and your resumes to make sure that you don't get filtered out. Today, the goal is to, of course, you've applied to a job. Now you have not been filtered out and you are at your first interview with an organization, and I just kind of want to prepare you for what to expect. So I'm going to kind of go off topic a little bit from this document that I'm sharing on my screen, but this is from NHA, which I love. You guys know we use NHA for the test vendor to get you certified as phlebotomists and medical assistants and patient care techs. But they offer this really nice resource that kind of helps you prepare. So I'm going to point out the things that I think are very important, give some examples because I myself used to actually work for a hospital system. And I was the nurse manager of a 75-bed unit, and I had over 150 staff. So I definitely had to interview people, and I know what the company actually put me through training to interview people. So I know what companies are looking for, specifically one of the companies that are coming, because that's one of the companies I actually used to be a hiring manager for. So first things first, researching your company is huge. So for purposes, because this recording is going to go on YouTube after we're done today, I'm not going to say the name any organizations because I don't want there to be a misunderstanding that we're affiliated with them or a part of their organization. We are two totally separate entities. I've just collaborated with them to give you all job opportunities because that's important to me. But I will give you the names of those organizations when we're all done so that you can do your research on them and learn about them. But yeah, number one is doing your research about the organization. You want to know what other people are saying about the organization, what they think about it. You want to know if their values align with your values. I like to use this example a lot. Who in the room is familiar with Chick-fil-A? Okay, right. We pretty much all know Chick-fil-A. We also all know that Chick-fil-A is a Christian-based organization. We know that because that's a part of their marketing and a part of their message. Now, the reason why this is important to you in in researching before you interview is because number one, you may research a company and realize that they have values that you do not share. And if they have values that you do not share, then really, and I'm just going to be honest with you, I'm not a believer in just trying to get a job. I'm a believer in getting a job that aligns with me. And so if you already know that this organization does not align with you, you shouldn't work with them or work for them or even interview with them for that matter. So the reason why I'm using Chick-fil-A as an example is because there was a scenario or a situation where there was a gentleman who was transgender and wanted to work for Chick-fil-A. Well, of course, there was some head banging and some issues because he was expecting to be able to use a certain bathroom that he wanted to use, and he was expecting to be named certain or use certain pronouns being used, and so on. And I don't know if it was Chick-fil-A or Hobby Lobby. As I'm telling this, I believe it was Hobby Lobby actually. But anyway, Hobby Lobby is also a Christian-based organization. But the moral of the story is they weren't buying any of that. They were not worried about allowing him to use the bathroom he wanted to use. They were not about that life. They were not about using the pronouns and so on. And so therefore there became some headbutting between he and the organization. And then as you can ideally determine, either they're going to let him go because it doesn't work or because he keeps, bucking the system or vice versa. So you don't want to go through that scenario. If I research a company and I realize they don't have values that align with mine, I probably shouldn't be working there. You can't come to Hobby Lobby and expect them as a Christian-based organization to embrace what it is that you believe, because it's that's not how it goes. It goes the other way around. We are an organization, we have created this organization, and we believe in these values. If we hire you, you need to also believe in these values. And if you don't believe in them and you're going to fight and argue about it, you're going to have a huge problem with that organization. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So that's number one. Also knowing about like the culture of the environment, is it a laid back environment? Do they believe in allowing you to come with ideas and are they going to actually listen to those ideas? Or is it that within their organization, only upper management or upper leadership can come up with these ideas and so on? So if you can think of like research an organization, if after you research them, you find out you do like them and you do want to interview with them, I would create about two questions about the organizations to find out if their culture matches mine. Because culture isn't something you can figure out online, right? Unless you like, I think they have some websites where you can go and see other employees, but those employees are usually disgruntled. So seeing what other disgruntled employees have to say doesn't really help you. But you could ask questions and prepare for asking them about their environment. Like what type of managing style would you say you have? If I'm interviewing with the manager and at the very end they say, "Hey, you have any questions for me?" Always have questions. If you get all the way to the end of the interview and they say, "Do you have any questions for me?" and you have no questions, that is a red flag. So if I don't care if you identify two or three questions, identify them very early on. Even if you have them written down, that's fine. Pull that piece of paper out and say, "Actually, I did have three questions I wanted to ask you," and then start asking them. One of the questions I usually like to ask is, what is the managing style that you say you have? If I'm with the hiring manager, what type of managing style would you say you have? I want to learn if I'm compatible with you or whatever. And if they say if they start explaining how they manage, and it sounds like a red flag, then you know that. And if they start explaining and they sound, like somebody you would want to be around every day, then you know that. Another question I would ask them is about their benefits. Can you tell me what type of benefits your organization provides its employees? I'll say that again. Can you tell me what type of benefits your organization provides its employees? And then specifically, anyone in this room who wants to go back to school, the specific question is, do you provide tuition assistance? That's huge. I may have told some of you and not all of you, I have three different degrees. I did not pay for any of them. I did not go into any debt because I did pay for my patient care tech certification. I paid for that, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't go into debt. So I only worked for organizations that would pay for my education. All
How
right,
many
go
last
ahead.
question, please?
Go right ahead.
Can you word that last question again?
Oh, okay, yeah. What benefits does your organization offer its employees?
Okay, I have that one. Do you offer
Tuition assistance.
tuition assistance? That's what I'm trying to get.
Mhm. And then, maybe tuition assistance isn't your thing. Maybe you're more worried about healthcare insurance. Ask that. Do you offer your employees healthcare insurance? Or maybe if you're only interviewing for a part-time position, you can ask them, do you offer your part-time employees healthcare insurance? So those are some questions I would ask. And just think of anything else you would want to know. Anybody in the room can think of a question that they'd be interested in asking an employer that I haven't mentioned already?
I do.
Yeah,
Me
what
too.
is it?
Miss P. Um, is it offensive to ask how often they do raises?
I wouldn't say raises. I would say like, see, everything is all about words. But no, it's not offensive to ask that. But I would ask like, how often does your organization conduct employee reviews?
Okay, how
Yeah,
often?
like employee reviews and raises. Like, do it in that way. It's definitely offensive to ask in the very first interview how much are you going to pay me? Because they don't know yet. They know the range, but if you are applying for this position and you're fresh out of phlebotomy school, And if I apply for the physician position and I've been a phlebotomist for 10 years, clearly our pay is going to be different, right? And
Correct.
so HR usually has like some type of formula that they use in the background once they know they're going to hire you. They will use a certain formula to determine how much they're going to pay you. And so asking that in the interview becomes awkward because they don't have the answer right now. Um, but usually the jobs, depending on when you apply, they usually will say the range. But you'll know, like when they do call you and finally offer you the position, at that time you will know the amount. And and then you can tell them, that's okay with me, or no, I don't want it, right? Or my favorite, negotiate. Okay. My idea is to never accept the first offer. I think that you should always negotiate salary. And if they say that they won't go up, that's fine. At least you asked. At least you tried. All right, Mo, you had a question that you were going to ask?
Yeah, I was gonna say I would probably ask like what the workload looked like or how many what I mean the average at least working in the doctor's office or like stuff like that
Yeah.
they
How
can
many
relate
patients
to
does
that.
this, how many
Yeah.
patients does this practice see per day?
Yeah.
Yep. That is an appropriate question. Yeah. How many patients does your practice see a day? Or for the phlebotomist, how many patients would I see a day? Or how many sticks, whatever. For people who are patient care techs, how many patients will I be assigned per day? What's the usual assignment? Any other questions someone thinks of that they would ask during the interview that I haven't mentioned or no one else has? Okay,
Mm.
I do have something.
yeah, go ahead.
So I've been kind of sketchy about Craigslist, but I ended up applying for a hospital in Atlanta. I forgot the name of it. And they did a virtual interview with me. And some of the questions they asked me was how many successful venipunctures have I had? Have I ever done any type of sticks on kids? And they also asked me the steps. And the questions that they asked me now that I know what they kind of asked, I'm happy that I took that one interview because now I know in the future what to ask. But they wanted to know how many successful sticks have you had? How many do you think you can do in a day? Have you ever did venipuncture on kids? What are the steps for venipuncture on kids? What is the steps for butterfly? What is the steps for syringe? They wanted to know all that.
Okay. And
Yeah.
that's typically, and I will say this, typically in the interview, they usually don't go that deep. I
Mm-hmm.
know for the organizations that are coming here, they're not going to go that deep because they know our curriculum and they know what we teach. So that's why they're probably not going to go as deep. But yeah, for an organization that doesn't know you, and especially with you being a new phlebotomist, they're definitely going to be asking questions. And I will tell you this right now. If you don't have an answer to a question and they ask you something that you're sitting there and you're thinking like, I think I know this answer, but I'm not quite sure, or you think like, I don't know the answer to this question at all, I would be honest because that's a part of them testing you to see like in real life, if you didn't know, would you just try to act like you did? Because if so, that's dangerous, right? But if you don't know, I would say, you know what? I've never been in that position before to have to do that. But what I do know is I would look into my resources, I would ask a trusted source, and then I would go at that task. That would be the answer if you don't know the answer. Okay, because then it shows that you have critical thinking and you're not dangerous. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay to not have an answer in the interview. You just got to have the right rebound answer. I don't have the answer to that right now. I haven't been in that position, but I would utilize my resources to make sure I would get assistance to make sure I could go at that the right way.
Oh, okay. Sounds good.
All right, next is tweaking your resume, which we've already done. We've already done the tweaking of your resume, so we're going to skip over that. But anticipate questions, which Ms. Neely has kind of already brought up. You can anticipate questions that they're going to ask. One of the biggest things that I see in interviews that I was also taught to do in interviews is to ask specific questions and see how the candidate responds. An example of that would be, I may ask a question about, I want to see how you deal with conflict. I want to see if you're going to be a problem on in my organization. When you come in contact with conflict, are you going to fold? Are you going to address it, but in a agitated, aggravated way? Or are you going to just run to the supervisor and have the supervisor deal with it, right? By the way, all three of those are bad. The real answer is, are you going to try to deal with it in the most judicial way possible? That's the right answer. And so I'll give you an example. So number one, I was always trained to ask the person in the interview, can you tell me a time about when a customer wasn't happy or someone you worked with, if you're new and you've never worked before, someone you worked with at school where there was a conflict and you had to find a way to resolve it. Can you tell me a time and explain to me what you did? Now, I tell all of my students, just think right now to yourself about that time and remember that time. And think about how you'd say that time. Say it to yourself in the mirror. Because I promise you, 9 times out of 10, they're going to ask you something along the lines in your job interview about how you deal with conflict. And if you're not prepared for that answer, or you do a lot of stuttering, or you give a vague answer, which is the one I hate, I absolutely hate the vague answer of, well, usually when I come into a situation of conflict, I just try my best to be calm and I try my best to talk to the person. That is not the answer we're looking for. Does anyone know why that's not the answer we're looking for?
No.
No, that seems like an answer you think they want to hear instead of like realistic, like when a conflict happens, like how you're supposed to, you know?
I said, name a time. Can you tell me a time when you had conflict and what you did? I didn't say tell me generally how you behave in conflict. So this now reflects two issues. The first issue, it reflects that you don't know how to follow direction. I told you to tell me a time. I was looking for you to say one time in band camp. I'm just kidding. One time when I was working here, this girl, and I was a barista, and this girl got the customer got mad because I made her coffee wrong. This is how and then tell the story. Okay, that's what we want to hear. So number one, if you didn't tell a story, you just said sometimes I just be calm and you didn't follow direction. Number two, exactly what you just said, Mo, was you're just kind of trying to say what you think I want to hear. That's very clear. So again, I want everyone to be thinking about a time because I promise you they're going to ask you something along the lines of that. And if you haven't already thought about that time, I don't care if you've never had a time. I've had people say, I've never had a time where I had conflict at work. Well, make up one. Make up a whole scenario in your brain about what something could have happened and what you did. Because I'm telling you now, they're going to look at you like, how did you make it this far in life and you've never had a conflict? That is questionable. Yes, Mr. Battle.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey there. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. It was crazy. I had an interview yesterday, and that was a question that was asked, was a conflict, but then he tried to throw a little curveball. I guess it was at the end where, similar to your question, conflict, but it was more so specifically, when was there a time that maybe one of my coworkers was having an issue with a customer or a client, or the customer or client was going to walk out, and I was able to resolve the issue, basically retaining the customer without them leaving the store or whatever
Mm,
uh, facility. So basically, like if me you working and you have an issue and they like, oh, you know what, screw you, they about to leave, and I come in and I'm somehow able to resolve them and retain the customer. That was one of the questions that the manager gave me yesterday in my
okay.
interview.
Very
So
good. Thanks for
appreciate
sharing that.
the question they asked, something similar. Just to pick back up what you saying, like that is a very common question they do ask about conflict.
So what did you say?
What did I say? My answer was for that. From my extensive experience, I told him from the time when I worked at PetSmart, back when I was younger and in high school. I probably was a sophomore, and I gave him an example when there was a client who came in, a customer, and they were coming in for, excuse me, specific brand of dog food, or I think a toy that they had saw online, and they said we had it in the store and they didn't have it. And one of the my coworkers saw me coming down the aisle and asked me a question. I saw there was a little bit of issue going on. I could see the customer's face. And so I just asked what was going on, and they were able to explain to me. So then I was able to redirect them to maybe other merchandise that we might have had that could be um, that their dog would maybe like, because I think the
Like
dog
comparable.
yeah, and the dog
Mhm.
had like a certain type of I think like a certain issue, like anxiety wise, like some particularly. So you wanted there's certain particular type of toys as well as treats you could put in the toy, as I was explaining. So I asked the person where their dog was, and they said their dog was in the back because I worked in the grooming, but I was on the floor that day just walking around, and they was like, "Yeah, my dog's." I said, "Well, when your dog gets done grooming, let's bring your dog and let's try out these different toys with treats and see which one the dog takes to. And then if that works for you and your dog, and it's within your budget, then we'll go that route. And I could also have my manager, one of the managers, come speak to you and maybe giving you a discount because they showed me their phone. I was like, well, let me see where it shows that. Because sometimes you may have need to refresh it. It could be update. It could have been like maybe like a, you know how they do, 30% discount or
Yeah.
hey, so for whatever for from this time frame to this time frame. But it actually did show that it was currently in the store, and that was not true. So the
Mm.
manager came when we came to the front desk. I walked up with the person, told the manager, and they were able to, I think, give the person a reduction on price of that product that they with.
Excuse me,
So
sorry. Everything about your example, Desmond, was beautiful, actually.
yeah, so that was one of the examples I gave. Because the person, another thing, I know you were telling us before when we was in class to have our resume. I did not have mine with me, so shame on me. But they did have it. I was planning to. I didn't get the time to grab it. So he had it in front of him and he was going through it. And one thing I noticed, because it's been a while, but from previous resumes, when they look at my career, especially in the Navy, they try to maybe ask different questions. So I would just say, like, depending on how long you worked in one particular company or for an entity, they'll look at that and they'll probably try not to ask questions based on that because they know you're going to go there from your experience. And that's what
Yeah.
he kept saying. He's like, yeah, I know if I ask this question, you're going to automatically gravitate to your time in the Navy and be able to utilize that to answer my questions. So I'm going to ask you something different and maybe go to a different time. I was like, yeah, yeah, that was the most recent, longest time I was in something. Wait, but I was like, I got other experience as well, but the other experiences predates my time in the Navy. Or he talked about the Hero Institute. He's like, oh, well, I also use this because he asked me another question pertaining to that particular question was, um, it, what again a situation similar to that did I in a very I guess similar environment, which would have been Hero Institute because it was CSL that I went to. I had a
Okay.
interview at. So he was saying anything similar to that same particular type of environment that I've worked in that I could equate to having to resolve an issue with a coworker.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
his thing was with the issue with a coworker about policies and procedures. And so then I answered him, and then I followed up with my question for him was like, well, where could I find those policies and procedures if I have to utilize that with that individual? Because my answer for that, when he asked me if I'm having an issue with one of my coworkers, I said, well, first, I guess I will ascertain the situation, like figure out what's going on. I'm not going to approach the person with an attitude, but if they're giving me attitude or issues, well, I'm going to, try to remove myself in a respectful, peaceful way. But then if it's pertaining to policies and procedures, because at this time he hadn't told me what the policy procedures were. He said they're all electronic, but I was going
Mm-hmm.
to utilize the time to like, hey, well, I would approach the person basically in a very calm and composed way and say, hey, okay. Instead of me telling them that they're wrong, I say, hey, maybe there's a better way of doing that, but let's find out together. I would grab the policy procedures and read, even if I know
A
they're
good
doing
one.
the wrong thing, I would go over the policies and procedures with them, but like, okay, so it says right here, this is how such and such needs to be done.
I like that. Let's see together. I like that
Yeah,
because
you
it's
know what I'm
not
saying? Let's
like
see together.
like maybe I could be wrong. You know what I mean? So
Right. You know what I'm saying?
that's
Instead of just coming super direct, be like, hey man, I think you're doing that wrong. You're doing that wrong. Because when you tell somebody they're doing something wrong, or you be like, look, when you first thing you say the word look, they're automatically going to get in a defensive mode and going to
yeah,
retaliate with aggression. And that's
right.
not something that you want, especially for the situation to escalate, because then you will do the same thing and now it's an argument and it can escalate. So it's more like to say, hey, I noticed you were doing this. Um, I want to pull up the policies and procedures, just however way you can kind of lead into it to see if that's what you was doing, because I'm curious, because I'm new here. I want to, even if you know it, you don't got to tell them that. Regardless, it's to resolve the issue so that they don't continue to do that. And I thought, like I said, with my question, I was like, well, what if the person has been doing this continuously and I notice it? I said, well, then, or that's what I said that, but I was like, well, and if the person's been doing it continuously, then I will bring it up to management. Whether
Right.
he was like, well, we have leads, and that's what I was thinking he was saying. I was like, well, that's what I thought you were about to say. He's like, yeah, we have leads too, and I was like, okay, well, I see what you're saying. You want me to follow the chain of command as usual, it's a military thing because he's military. He was like, yeah,
Right.
definitely, you already know. I said, well, of course, then that's when I'll do it, but I will try to resolve the situation at the lowest level before I bring it up to the next level.
Which is the correct answer. I mean, I'm here to tell you now, when I've done interviews, a lot of people will immediately say, well, I would go to supervisor and da 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 da. Nobody wants to hear that. Because if I'm the supervisor, I'm already doing my job. I don't need to be dealing with all these random one-offs, and I'll never get my job done. And then now you become a problem employee because you can't handle your own business. That's what they're immediately looking at. If he or she is going to continue to run to me every time they have a problem, I don't want this employee.
Yeah,
So,
because they can't handle
yeah.
accountability, leadership.
Yep. Yep. Showing you have accountability, leadership, resourceful, that you're willing to look into resources to try to get the answer. And then you recognize that now I've done everything I can do. Now I'll have to move this up the chain of command. That is perfect. Thank you for sharing that with us, by the way.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, no
I
question.
think I saw Maitea had her hand up. Did you still have something? No? Okay.
I have something, Ms. Victoria.
Yeah.
With me having fibromyalgia, how would I introduce that and ask them how they would handle, if I need to stop for a moment or
So
how,
you're not going to mention that at all in the first interview. Um,
okay.
and thanks for bringing that question up. Things you should never bring up in the very first interview, because I'm here to tell you right now, if you do, it may be a sign, and they're going to, even though legally they should not, they will try to count you out. So things you should never mention in the first interview is anything personal. You don't want to tell them about any health care conditions. You don't want to tell them how old you are. You do not want to tell them that you have children. You do not want to tell them you are engaged and getting ready to be married. You do not want to tell them any of these things. That is not a part of the interviewing process. Once you are offered the position and you accept the position, that is the time to then let them know about anything that like, okay, thank you for offering me. Because once they offer you the position, they offered it to you. Okay, they can't necessarily quote unquote receipt it unless you are giving them a reason to receipt it. So now they've offered it. Yes, I'm willing to accept. Here are some things you need to know. Okay, but no one should be bringing up any of those topics. Now, in regards to you do want to get a little personable with them. Like, I like to tell them things about like what I like to do for fun, right? So I love to skate. So if they may ask me something like, tell me something about yourself, because they always do that. And I'm telling you right now, they're doing that to set you up. Tell me something about yourself. And then I just tell them something about myself that is personal, but still has to do with work. Like, oh, I love doing this. I love taking care of people. I love caring for people, which is all true. And I might say something like, oh, I love to skate on the weekends. Or I would never say, oh, and I love to take my kids to the zoo on the weekend. No, because immediately now they hear, oh, she's got kids. And then once you mention it, now you have opened the door and they can ask you, how old are they? Da 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 da. And when they ask you, oh, she got young kids, they 3, they 4, she gonna be calling out, they gonna be sick, we don't want her. Yes, that is illegal, but I'm here to tell you, I have watched it happen. That's why we do not mention anything personal in the first interview. Everybody with me on that?
Yes.
They don't know you ain't got a car. They don't need to know you live on the other side of town. It's going to take you an hour to get there. If that's the case, then just gracefully bow out if they offer it to you later. They don't need to know any of that stuff.
Okay, when you say it's okay to say I love caring for people, and they say, well, what does that mean?
Okay, then explain. For you, I love to cook and I love to see the smile on people's faces when I cook. I love the joy it brings them. Bring it back to your own personal thing that you like to do. It doesn't have to be healthcare related.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Battle?
Oh no, I was gonna say, yeah, I already said I didn't get personal, but I did say something. I was like, yeah, I probably didn't get the job.
What'd you say?
It's something that again, it's been a while. And he was talking about the hours. And he went to go talk about the pay. I brought nothing up about the pay or about the schedule because he wasn't because it was the person who was supposed to interview me had left. They
Mhm.
had somehow um scheduled the wrong time frame for our interview, and I got there at the time that I had seen an email, but they meant to schedule it for earlier time. And so I interviewed with the next manager that was there. And so because he was the assistant, he was like, well, I don't know if the person wants you part-time or full-time, but these are the hours from 6 to 6, Monday through
Mhm.
Friday, and Saturdays. I think he said 12 to 3, just whatever. And then he was like, the pay for you, because you're certified, you might fall into the category of 16 plus. I don't know what the plus is what he was
All
saying.
right.
He said you might get in more of that because you have it. You went to school and you're certified. And that was another thing. They didn't ask for my certification. All they asked for was form of uh what's it called? Form of identity, like my driver's license or
Okay.
social for later time. But so no, I mentioned school that I will be attending school potentially. Now I told him that I don't know my time that I'll be in school or days. I don't know any of that. But when I do get that, I will communicate that with them and to work around that schedule. He said, yeah, that'd be no problem. I will address that with Dante, who actually had the same last name as me. Um, but
Okay.
so that was one of the things that I mentioned. And since you had just said that, I was like, well, damn, that could have been. But they said, that'd be great if you can and we can work. You're willing to work around your schedule. That's a great thing
Yeah.
that I mentioned, and the mentor said that too, as well as my appearance too. Like
Yeah.
I say, dress to impress.
Well, I want to piggyback off what you're saying about the schedule. I don't think that that's too bad mentioning like, hey, if this position I'm applying for is 6 to 6, right?
Mm.
Monday through Friday or whatever, right? Like it's okay to say, well, I was really looking for something that was a little more flexible or something on the weekend or whatever. And they might be like, oh, okay, well, we actually do have another position like this
Right.
that's okay. That is okay to mention. I wouldn't get too far down like, oh, well, I'm gonna be going to school on Mondays and Tuesdays and it's gonna
Nah,
be
yeah, because
like now I'm sitting here like you getting me involved in your drama already and you ain't even an employee. Like,
right, yeah, and but no, I was honest. I don't know my schedule. I don't have a
Yeah.
time, and the school thing is still on hold. So I was like, yeah, just in case. But this is just to give them, like you said, a little bit of information, just to not be like something. At least from my experience in jobs I've had, to not blindside somebody. Like
Right.
it's
Right.
a little bit of information. I mean, you don't necessarily have to, but then once you get the job, you can tell them. But then it's like, okay, but dang, they're in their mind, like we all do. Sometimes we always have an assumption. If you apply for the job, sometimes common sense is not
You can do it.
present. That if you apply for the job and we've already elaborated or listed the hours our position that position is available like part-time, but these are hours that we work, these are days you working, you're basically indicating to them you are going to be available.
Right.
So by not me telling them that, or at least for me, I felt that it was necessary to tell them because it's like, yo, I'm applying for part-time. As I told him, he was like, well, yeah,
Yep.
see, I don't know if it's part-time or full-time. I was like, well, yeah, I'm looking for part-time. I told him that straight up.
Yep.
And so
And
I'm not
nothing's wrong with that.
cool.
Nothing is wrong with that at all. I would want to be very forthcoming about that too. But all the other stuff, like I'm gonna be off in July because I'm getting married. Nope. I might need some time off in July and just leave it at that. Like, don't get into any specifics. It's none of their business because that would somebody, depending on the person, they will use it against you. Um, one thing I do want to point out here, as it mentioned on NHA, is some of you may have gaps in your employment. So if you have gap in your employment where it's like you weren't working for 2 years or something, that's okay. Like, don't feel bad about that. Just if they ask you about it, this is not something I would bring up, but if they ask you about it, then just explain to them why. So, it gave some examples here. Maybe you were on a sabbatical, maybe you were traveling the world, maybe you wanted 2 years off to take care of your mother who was sick. Maybe it was COVID and you just wasn't trying to go outside. Whatever it is, like just be honest about that. And then, but let them know that you're really excited and ready to get back into the workforce. And, and working for your organization would be, with the research I've done, working for your organization, this is definitely a place I would want to be. Like, that's how I would answer that. I'm sorry, I see Maitea has her hand up. I know you're doing something, Maitea, and I'll keep trying to get to you when you put your hand up, if you want to unmute.
Okay, so I kind of had a question.
Yeah.
I kind of came in a little late, but what is the base pay for a phlebotomist? Does it differ or is
So,
it pretty the same?
yeah, good question. So all of that information is on our website. So when you go to Hero Institute and then you pick whatever job you're going into, whatever field you're going into, it actually tells you the outlook here, which we got from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It usually tells you around about how much a phlebotomist may make in your state. And again, it's an around about. What happens is they do surveys and they ask a certain amount of people, certain amount of people reply back, and then they take that information, add it up, divide it by however many people answered, and they present the rate. For instance, with that position that Mr. Battle was just explaining, that they offered whatever amount, just because that they said that they were going to offer that, what was the very first thing I said as soon as we started this? You're always going to negotiate. So I don't believe in going directly with how much they tell me they're going to pay me. I'm always going to negotiate the pay. So it would be my suggestion to offer I'm happy you offered me the position. Is there room for the pay to be this amount? Is that in your budget or whatever? I was very excited about the job, but it would kind of have to work like this for me in order for me to move forward or whatever, right? It's okay to negotiate.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
What if they try to lowball you? Say, for instance, because everybody's trying to save money, and that doesn't exclude the employer or the owner of the company. And they say, well, we're starting at $13.50.
Then two things. You have to ask yourself two things, rather. Do I want to work for $13.50? A. B, if you think, well, maybe I'll work for them and they'll pay me however they're treating you. If you don't like that, then don't go for it. That's my philosophy. If I'm in the interview and I feel like maybe they're questioning me, inappropriately, or they're saying things to me that are questionable in the interview, I'm already knowing that it's not going to be a good vibe between the two of us, even if they offer it to me. And for that reason, I would not accept. So to answer your question, yeah, they may quote unquote lowball you. I'm not going to immediately just say, nope, I don't want the job. I'll say, thank you for the job offer. Would you consider this amount? And I would tell them specifically what I wanted. And if they won't consider it, then they won't. You just keep it pushing and continue.
Because even out here now, some fast food places will start you off at 15 and 16, and they're not certified to flip burgers.
Yep. All right. So with number 4 here from the NHA is basically saying that you need to just rehearse some constant questions that we know for a fact you may be questioned. And here's some of them right here. Remember, I told you one of the main things they're going to ask you is tell me about yourself. Look in the mirror and answer that, but answer it succinctly. This is not an answer that needs to be 5 to 10 sentences long. Tell me about yourself can be a good 5 sentences and be done. What made you interested in working here? That's where your research came in. Remember, we told you to research the company. Every company has a About Us page. Their About Us page is going to have their mission, their values, and all that. So you read their mission and their values as an organization, and you ask yourself, do my mission and do my values in life align with this organization? And if they do, then I would speak to those. Let me give you guys a good example. So where we live, because we all know we're in Atlanta. Wellstar Hospital is one of the biggest hospital systems in the Cobb County area, which again, we are in Cobb County. So I'm going to go to Wellstar's website as an example. And let's see, here it is, About Us. So every page is going to have About Us. The About Us page talks about leadership, who's on their board of trustees, blah, 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 right? You can look at all of this stuff. The fact that they're accredited or any certifications they have, that could be something. I noticed that Wellstar was accredited by JACO or whatever, and I want to work for an organization that does that, that has the highest standard. That's something you can say. Here on Wellstar, it says about Wellstar's mission and values. So you can read through these, understand what they are, and then ask yourself, oh, I feel that way too about life. Oh, I like this too. And then you can use that in your interview. It says, what is your biggest strength and what is your biggest weakness? Now, this is also another question that a lot of people get caught up in and may say something they don't need to say. What is your biggest weakness? You cannot say you don't have a weakness because you do. We all do. And as long as your weakness isn't scary and you let it be known that it is something you're working on, then it's okay. So far, since we've had quite a few people already in interviews, and I'm so happy to hear that you guys are applying and you're actually getting calls and you're going to interviews. I'm so excited about that. Would anyone like to share if they've been asked this question and how they may have responded? Anybody been asked this?
I wasn't asked it.
No? Okay. What about you, Allie? I know you've been on a few interviews.
No, ma'am, that was one of the questions. That wasn't one of the questions I was asked. What is your biggest weakness?
Okay. Yes, Miss Capers.
So I actually kind of was asked something similar, but it wasn't in my recent interviews for phlebotomy. It was more so I worked in customer service for a long time, and I worked for Disney and Apple while working from home. I can't see the question anymore, but I was gonna see if I can reread it and then
What's your biggest weakness?
Yeah. So actually, Apple asked what was my biggest weakness with technology, and I'm pretty good with technology. I have an iPhone. I do have a business, so I do have a couple of other Apple products like Macs and tablets. But I didn't want to sound like a know-it-all, like, oh, I know all the Apple products. So I was just basically like, I just named a software that Apple uses, like an app or software internally that I'm working on. I just pretended like I didn't know and what I did to understand what I was uncertain about and how I applied it to that position. So I guess in phlebotomy, I would, if I was asked, I guess I would really be, I know now to state the weakness instead of being like, oh, I don't have any weaknesses. And if it is something, it's very minor because they do want to see the vulnerability in you and that you do struggle from time to time, but that you're persistent and want to work at overcoming whatever your weaknesses are. So
exactly. And that's the biggest thing. Like whatever you name your weakness to be, then acknowledge like, and I'm doing these 3 things to work on that as we speak. Or I've been doing these 3 things the past year to work on that. Because to your point, no one is perfect. We all have a weakness, but the question is, do you even know what because if you say you don't have a weakness, then that means you're not even there mentally enough to assess yourself to identify a weakness. That is a problem. Right. And so if you can name that, yes, I do know I have this weakness, and then you just name it and you go about your life. Now I, as the person interviewing you, is like, okay, what are you doing about it? Right. Like, I don't want to have to say that. I want you to automatically identify what you're doing to make it better. And I want to hear what those steps are, because then I'm also thinking to myself, oh, those are some really good ways. And, or why are they doing that? That's not really going to help, so I want to see that you're thinking through it. One of the biggest weaknesses, I think usually in my interviews, I've always said, which is still true to this day, is that I am like a workaholic. I work a lot. And so, of course, that's going to be a positive for an employer in a way, right? But for me and my work-life balance, it isn't. And so I'll tell them like, I am a workaholic. I have a tendency to when people call me, I'm going to be there for them. Like, but unfortunately, what that does to me as a person is it does decrease my work-life balance, or sometimes it can cause me to be a little tired. And so I've identified that. And so therefore, so that I won't wear myself down, these are some things I've put in place to help myself, right? So now I've recognized that if it's something I just really can't do, I just need to speak up and say, I'm sorry, I can't do that, rather than putting myself in a position to try to help when I know I really shouldn't be. Or I've also identified every Sunday, I'm going to go do these 5 things for myself just for self-care, so that during the week I am refreshed and ready. So like that's one weakness that is kind of possibly a positive, but it also could be a weakness for an employer because they might think like she might say she's going to do all these things and then never show up, right? They may think that. So anyway, just think about your weaknesses. Yes, Mr. Battle.
Cool. No, that was I like what I can't say her name. Miss Capers had said before when she was saying they asked her about technology. I think I was asked her some questions some years back when I applied to a job and then gave a response. But so when you were saying if we can't, or as she mentioned, you can't think of a weakness, and then for example, she was saying in technology, it just came to my mind. Why don't I guess if I was in a similar situation, I think of the time before I became acquainted with that technology or whatever now that am a weakness or just whatever they're asking me like, dang, because at one point in time I didn't know how to do something. So then
Right.
you can still refrain back to that time. I think you got to think of it when somebody's asking you, it's not about the current you, but any time in your life
That's a really good point.
to that for the past you, even with this Mac that I'm talking to y'all on, I'm still trying to figure it out. Like, so it could be my weakness. It's things I've acquired by constantly going there when I take it to the Apple store for specific matters. I ask them all other questions. But just thinking of different times when I didn't know how to access Zoom or how to utilize Zoom, what did I do? I asked questions.
Yeah.
I constantly, when I was on a Zoom call, I asked questions how to do it. I looked up Zoom tutorials. You know what I'm saying? Just things like that. I was like, dang, why don't we think of it like that? Or when I'm in that situation, they think of it like that. If they're asking me what my weaknesses is, not to think about who I am currently, who don't possess those weaknesses, but who I was prior to this.
Yeah,
What I
and
did.
I'm with you. That was a good point how my Taya Ms. Capers pointed that out. Like she thought in that way because she was having to think quick, right?
Right, right.
So yeah, that's a really good point. But I do want all of you to recognize, like I'm telling you now, these are potential questions. And so you want to already have your answer and be thinking about your answer and how you're going to say the answer. So when that moment comes, it does just float off of your tongue and you're not sitting there with like 45 seconds of silence between the two of you and you're feeling like, oh my God, I got to make something up right now. I got to make something up right now. I want you to have already thought about that. Another question I hear a lot is why did you leave your last position or why did you leave this particular company? No matter what your answer is, just make sure it's not bad mouthing the company. So you never want to say anything bad about the company, like, oh, they were doing this, or I didn't like my manager because of that. Because immediately they're going to think, oh, okay, well, when they leave my organization, if they leave, are they going to badmouth me? And so, even if it was because your manager got on your nerves, or even if it was because they were always understaffed and you couldn't stand it, whatever, because again, if you say you left because you're understaffed, I'm going to be thinking, oh, well, sometimes we're understaffed. And so, is she just going to run out, or is he going to just run out because we're understaffed for a week? Like, are they going to stick with me and try to work through it? So, just say something positive, um, but think of like, for instance, I may have left my position, my old position. Honestly, every old position I've ever lost was because I was trying to better myself. So I'll say I left that company because I wanted to do something different. I wanted to challenge myself. I felt like I knew the ins and outs of that position and there was no room for growth within the company. And I wanted to challenge myself. Therefore, I went to another company, right? With another position. Of course, they're gonna look on your resume and say, okay, well, was the next position higher or was the next position different? So you got to make sure it correlates, but don't say anything bad about the company. All right, next one on here, we already talked about preparing some of your own questions. So again, Be an active interviewer and not just an interviewee. Nobody wants to date someone who just talks where they're just talking to themselves. They do want to have a conversation. So when they say, do you have some questions for me? Again, please have some. It does not look good if you don't. And then planning your outfit. All right. So planning your outfit for the day of the interview. For allied healthcare, I mean, I like to tell people, even though you're in allied healthcare, I know it says here, quote unquote, don't wear scrubs and business attire is safe and formal is even better. That is true. But there is because you guys are students and you're here at your site at the facility, it's not going to be wrong to wear scrubs. I just wanted to point that out. But I would say business casual or higher. There's no such thing as being overdressed. I mean, unless you're coming in like ball gown attire, which would be ridiculous. But of course, if you want to have a suit or if you want to have a nice blouse or a nice button-up shirt and some slacks, that's fine. Just make sure that when you come in, like you don't look disheveled, like you just try to hurry up and get here on time. Because now I'm thinking, dang, if she doing this for the interview, well, he doing it, what is he gonna do on the first day? So you got to think about the whole, like how you present yourself, how you show up. Everyone should be bringing more than one resume. I'm here to tell you now. Remember, I told you there's at least 2 companies that will be interviewing you, and there may be more than one person in that setting. So you want to have at least it's gonna be my recommendation at least to have 4 or 5 resumes printed off and bring them with you. You have not formally applied for this position, so they don't already have your resume. They are going to be looking at your resume on the fly. They are going to be, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, they are going to be like, just kind of looking at your resume to figure out right then and there where they could fit you in or whatever. So consider that and be aware of that. It's okay to explain some stuff that's on your resume because remember they haven't had a chance to look at it thoroughly before you got there, but just make sure you have multiple copies because they will make notes and review the resume again later before they make final decisions. So here it says, pack your bag, make sure you have extra copies of your resume, a list of references just in case they ask for them. Prepare to take notes. So when you ask questions and they give you the answers, you can have a little place to write notes. I love this. Make sure you take a breath mint. You could be great, but if that breath is funky, you might have ruined it. So that is true. And then just be early. So interviews are going to start at 9 a.m. and until noon. Again, I would not be the one showing up at 9 a.m. Like if I wanted to be the first person interviewed, I'm probably gonna be there at 8:30, 8:45. Like, just think about that. And interviews also will be on a rolling basis. So it's gonna be first come, first serve. Whoever shows up first gets interviewed first and so on. And if you want to interview with both companies, which I suggest you do, then you'll go to the room and interview with both companies and take your time. You will have somebody that will be guiding you to letting you know which room to go to and where to be and so on. So someone will be here from our staff to help you with that. But just know that, you're going to be going, you might be here for a couple hours. So make sure you eat before you come and you have your water and everything. You guys already know where we are. So this idea of planning your commute is good if you're interviewing elsewhere. I know people are doing a lot of virtual interviews now, always be in that waiting room early, 10 minutes early at least. For buffer because anything could happen. You could pull up your Zoom and Zoom decided that it wants to update. And then you come into the meeting and it was at 9:30 and you come up at 9:35. I don't want to hear about how your Zoom had to update. I don't care. You're late. And now you've made me late because I got people to interview every 30 minutes. So now I don't even kind of secretly don't even want to hear what you have to say half this interview because now you've already ruined my day. So, and again, no one cares that your Zoom didn't update. You should have tested that yesterday or an hour before. Also, for those of you who are doing interviews on the virtually, please do not use a phone. Do not use a phone. If you have to, fine, but if you can use a computer, that is better because phones are always doing something stupid, A, and B, they got like a small little box, that's B, and it's just off. If you can refrain from using a cell phone for interview, refrain. It's not going to not get you the job if you did. I just would not use one if I didn't have to. Yes, Mr. Battle. You can ready to go.
Interviews virtually? That's an option.
Yeah, some companies will interview you virtually. Sometimes,
Oh,
yeah, if it's like the second interview or something, like they met
I'm
you in
thinking
person,
you
like
talking about this Thursday. The interview's gonna be virtually. Like
no,
that's.
they're in person.
I was about to say, oh man, bet. You in person. That's fine too. But I was like, okay, hold on. Where was I at? I didn't get the memo. For that
No,
one.
they're definitely in person, but just, for future reference in case you guys are going on other interviews.
But what happens in the event that you don't have a computer?
Then you just got to use your cell phone. But if you use your cell phone, like position yourself, like right now, Miss P, not to pick on you, but if we were interviewing, right, and I know this is not an interview, but if we were interviewing, like I would be so mad at your setup right now. Like I can't even see you. I can't, so and that's you have to like get your phone and sit it somewhere where it doesn't fall or all that kind of stuff. It just can be awkward. And then who wants to stand there and do this for 30 minutes? Like you're going to be tired of doing that. So you've got to really get a good setup when you have a cell phone. And then sometimes people will like be in front of a what do you call it? In front of a window. Well, if you're in front of a window and it's sunny outside and you're on your phone camera or even your virtual camera, I'm not going to be able to see you. You're going to look like a black speck of dust. But if you have your face towards the window, like right now my face is towards the window, that's why you can see me very good. But if I went and took my computer and stood in front of, let me show you like this. Like when you're doing virtual meetings, you want to be facing the window. If I came and actually went towards the window and it was really sunny outside, it ain't sunny. But you can notice how I'm just a little bit more cloudy, right? Or I'm going to be a little bit more dark. So you always want to be the opposite direction because it's a lot more clear.
Okay, so we'll perhaps find a background that's neutral in the background, like you are, with the white in the back, maybe, and well lit.
Yep, exactly. All right, so that is pretty much the end. Was there a question that anyone had that they were burning and want me to answer? Because now's the time.
Can you ask them if they offer any type of bonuses or?
Well, you can ask like, does your organization have any type of
Holidays, stuff like that?
yeah, you can ask about holidays. I was just about to say incentives. Like there's like what is it called? It's called oh, it left me. It's like employee incentives. Like for instance, if we are having a quota of making sure we see 50 patients a day, and I meet that quota every time, is there any incentive or bonuses that your organization offers for that, right? That may be a question. I don't know that they do that very often anymore, except in primary care. In primary care, like outpatient care, they usually do, but not in the hospital. Yeah.
Are questions different somewhat for the traveling uh, phlebotomist versus in-house?
They're going to want to just see that you are independent, you're an independent thinker, right? And that you can make critical thinking decisions and choices. You'd have to be strong in that area because you're going to be out in the field by yourself. So in that scenario, I would ask them like, do you have an orientation period and what does that orientation period look like? Right? And that's a good question for any employer. But especially for the mobile phlebotomist, because as a new phlebotomist, and they know you guys are new, they scouted us out as a company, as a school rather. So they know you're going to be new, and they're okay with that. They're still willing to hire a mobile phlebotomist that's a new phlebotomist. But the question is, what type of orientation process am I going to get? Are you just going to throw me out there for 2 days with somebody and then I got to figure it out on my own? Or will you have me with somebody for a month? Like, what does it look like? And then you have to ask yourself, am I okay with that? Am I comfortable with that?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not, I always ask, is that negotiable? Yeah. So pretty much everybody that's here, everyone plans on attending the resume session. I mean, the interview sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Awesome.
One more question. Are you there?
Yeah. Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, like for those of us that wear nose rings and a bunch of jewelry, is it best to take all that off during the interview, or just be yourself with what you wear? You know, all that
Um,
every.
Yeah, good question. So minimal rather, jewelry is best. And then if that is really a part of you, then I would ask them during the interview how they feel about that. What is their company policy on that, right? But like a minimal, like a little small nose stud, and earrings is fine, but if we have like a lot of facial piercings, kind of like the larger bull piercing and eyebrow piercing and all of that, I would remove those and then just ask them what their policy is on those if that's something important to me to have to wear at work. Because again, it goes back to values. If your values don't align with the company and you want to be able to wear that, then maybe that company isn't for you, but some companies may not care, and that's okay. Starbucks is a company that they let people wear and do whatever they want. There's a lot of companies that are okay with that as a part of their brand.
Mhm.
But I wouldn't want to count myself out if I know I'm willing to do that for the job.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I didn't address that. Same thing with tattoos too.
Better try to cover those up.
Yep, it's best to cover them up and then learn what their policy is on those. All right, I see Desmond has his hand up.
Yes. So the piggyback off what you were mentioning, or somebody had mentioned about um, the orientation, especially because they were talking about being a mobile phlebotomist. Now, if we ask and they tell us there's no orientation, or they do tell us orientation, well, my question is, how would you go about asking? Do they provide any, um, how can I say this, continuous education to keep us up to date with new changes, policies when it comes to, again, state uh, requirements, or as well as with any other health association requirements? How would you ask that?
Yeah, good question. And you actually just reminded me another thing that I would ask any mobile company. But to answer that particular question, I would ask them, do you offer continuing education reimbursement? Or because like certain companies will offer you like, hey, we know you have to do continuing education.
Hmm.
So here's, I don't know, $300 to pay for your continuing education once a year. So I would ask them, does your company, and I would pose it like this: continuing education and staying abreast in this to the ever-changing technology in this field is really important to me. So I was wondering, does your company offer continuing education reimbursement or any type of continuing education courses that I can take to stay abreast to those things?
I like how you said abreast. And I like I know the courses also meant like courses, but also meant like so like for just as I'm a barber, haven't been cutting in a while, but I know at one point in time before I moved back home out here when I was still in Cali that they were trying to change as a whole in every state the way you would go about being barbering, because you're free, you're just a contractor, like you go into
Right.
you pay for the booth, but they were trying to make it more so kind of like a basic 1099 where you're not really no longer a contractor, like you have to be associated with an organization or be affiliated with that shop like a normal 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I was kind of saying with them, like, how would you ask that question? But I do like how you said to, keep abreast when it comes to like education. But I was looking for more like a state thing. Like say if the state said, for phlebotomy, these are the new requirements that you have to do to be mobile.
Mm-hmm.
I would feel companies would you would think companies would do it, but I've, from experience of CNA, I know there were companies, for at least not me personally, but other graduates that I graduated with when I was CNA, that had those issues with companies, did not keep them abreast to new changes that were being implemented by the state guidelines when it came to what we do falling into like contract
Okay, I'm
work.
with you. So
Right.
how does your company educate and disseminate any new regulations that come down in our in healthcare? Yeah, there you go. So how does your company educate and disseminate? How does your company educate its employees and disseminate information when changes arise in healthcare?
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's how. Yeah,
Appreciate
that's a
that.
really good question.
Definitely.
And then also, this is what made me think of another question,
Okay.
and that was about mileage.
Right, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, when you're a mobile phlebotomist and you're going to be driving from A to, from Ruta to Tuta, you want to know that they're going to reimburse you for your mileage. And so asking like, what is your current mileage reimbursement for the mobile phlebotomist? What does that look like? Also, how far am I expected to travel outside of my residential zone so that, if I live in Cobb County, are you going to expect me to go all the way to, I don't know, Snellville, right? Or do you have a person that's already in Snellville so I don't have to worry about that? What does that look like? And I wouldn't say it in a way of like, I ain't doing that, but I would ask, just like I'm generally interested, how do you deal with in mobile phlebotomy in Atlanta is such a large market. How do you deal with needing draws in such far areas such as Marietta to Snellville? What would that look like? Do you have a person allocated to Snellville versus Marietta and so on?
Yeah, I know one job employer I was reading about, I was thinking of applying to, I think they indicated that they did not reimburse for
For
mileage.
mileage?
Yeah, but that they
Yeah.
would give like that would already be included in the pay, basically. Like you wouldn't get it like a kind
Hmm.
of like an extra incentive or for however many you did that day.
Right.
With 5 locations and then 5 successful or whatever they needed me to do. I got it done successfully within a certain time frame that they gave me to have this stuff completed. Then I think that's how I would go. As I was reading it.
Yeah, and sometimes, like, I mean, not paying mileage is a concern to me,
For sure.
but to your point, like, if there's something, like, sometimes they'll be like, oh, well, we're hiring you as a 1099, you can just write it off on your taxes, da 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 da. That ain't enough for me personally. But, if your going pay was $18 an hour, but you're willing to pay me 22 and not pay me for mileage, then maybe I'm okay with that. It just depends. It depends
All
on
right.
you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. No problem. Any other questions? All right. Well, this concludes our interview prep. I look forward to seeing you all here. Oh, I won't be here, but Miss Corey and Courtney will be here Thursday for the interviews, and the best of luck to all of you for that.